Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wow Week. We'll just take a minute while everybody's coming into our Zoom house. We're so glad that you can join us for Wow Week. We've had some really interesting talks so far. And tomorrow is our last talk at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern. We're going to be talking about airfares. Like, can anybody find an affordable airfare this year? Well, we're going to find out how. The best flights, best seats, best business class bargains. That's going to be tomorrow night. Tonight, we're here to talk about winter travel solutions, your smartest winter travel options. Very, very important this year. Before we get started, I just want to introduce Brooke Wilkinson. On the team. Many of you already know Brooke because she is at the other end of so many emails and questions that you sent us. Brooke, you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome back for many of you I know who tuned in earlier this week. So glad to have you. If you've been in past sessions, you know we throw a lot of links into the chat box, articles that are relevant to what we're talking about tonight. You can also find most of those on under the COVID trip solutions tab on our website, WendyPerrin.com. If you have any questions for the panelists, the travel experts we've got here tonight, please put those in the Q&A box and we'll try to get to those as many as we can in the second half of the hour. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Brooke. Yes, the Q&A box is the place to input your questions. And just before we get started, I would very much want to thank our sponsor of Wow Week, MedJet, which is an emergency travel assistance membership program. It provides medical air transport and crisis response and travel security. They transport for COVID globally now. And I've had a MedJet membership myself ever since the kids were little, and it gives us great peace of mind. And I want to thank them for sponsoring Wow Week and making this possible. And now I want to introduce our amazing Wow listers who are here with us from all over the world: Australia, Spain, Corsica, Buenos Aires. It's quite amazing the global intelligence that we've got with us here for the next hour. So we're going to be talking about winter travel, the holidays and beyond. So this winter is last night we talked about how tricky the summer is. The holidays and the winter is really tricky also in a lot of parts of the world, especially in the Southern Hemisphere. The reason why, first of all, there are 2 years of pent-up travel demand that have suddenly been unleashed. But another issue is that there are the people who, back in early 2020, they put down their deposits for the winter holidays 2020, and then they had to cancel because of the pandemic. And they postponed till 2021, and then they had to cancel again because of Omicron. So they're finally going to go this coming winter holiday season, hopefully. But basically, we're talking about kind of 3 years compressed into one season. And that's why in some parts of the world, it's tough. But we're going to find out what your smartest options are and where there is availability. And I would like to start with Maria Landers and Brian Dorr of CIU Travel. Hey, guys. Italy specialists on the Wow list. So there's no longer any pre-trip COVID test required to get into Italy.
Yes.
Yeah, and no surprise, Italy is flooded with travelers. And so tell us, are some of these travelers who maybe are getting dismayed about all the sold out hotels this summer, would you recommend they think about winter instead?
Definitely. I mean, if your dream is to go to the Amalfi Coast, I would not recommend that in December. But if you really want to come to Italy or Switzerland, I mean, they're two very different, and we can talk about that. But there is availability for both of those countries at, I think in the fall. The fall is becoming less so as it's booking up in Italy. But fall, the December holidays are still available. And I think a lot of people who have been planning family trips are looking, they say, oh, we can't do the family trip we want in the summer. Let's do the holidays with a family in Italy or in Switzerland. And that has been really great this year because both of those destinations are super family destinations. And we've been able to help a lot of people get into really good ski resorts or stay in really quaint small towns, which I do recommend in the winter as opposed to staying in the countryside. So you can have kind of a mix of city, Christmas markets and things, but also the kind of traditional, authentic, old-fashioned Italian or Swiss experiences that a lot of people have in mind when they think of going to these destinations.
What about Italy for Thanksgiving?
Yep, Italy's great for Thanksgiving.
We're in Italy for Thanksgiving almost every year. It's really, it's a great time to be there. I actually feel like I may have cursed the whole world because we were walking around Rome on December 3rd, I think, 2019. And I was talking about, oh, wouldn't it be great if it was always like this? And then 2020 happened and it was worse than like that. It was like nobody was allowed to walk around anywhere. So, but yeah, I mean, everything is, it's a very nice time to be there. You can still get a turkey. Ours barely touches the side of the oven in the house, but it's good. I mean, and there's truffles. It's chestnut season, which, there's a lot of roasted chestnuts roasting on open fire. You will find them all over Italy at that time of year. Olive oil has just been harvested. The wine has been harvested. But it's also the time when they're releasing the wines from 2 years ago, et cetera. So it's a great time to visit.
It's an active time, and it's fall, it's late fall, but it's not as cold as it is in some US places. It's just, it's a fall temperature and it's very pleasant.
I remember
you can still be outdoors a lot, even in
so that 2 winters before that winter in Rome, where I said I wish it was like this all the time, we were in Pienza on December 17th, and I have pictures of us having aperitivo outside. The sun was shining. There's the vineyards had all turned red. The leaves were turning red, and there was beautiful sunset. We went inside, and there was a crackling fire. They grilled the steak over the crackling fire as it got a little cool in the afternoon. It is just you can have amazing days. Santo Stefano, the 26th of December, is a national holiday, and many people spend it outdoors at garden parties with fire pits, etc. Even before COVID, after COVID, doesn't matter. It was always something that was done.
Great, that sounds great. Thank you. Let's move on to Jonathan Epstein.
I just want to I just wanted to note for Switzerland, because a lot of people panic about the availability of hotels and things for the holidays. And part of that is because the Swiss hotels block off, you can't see what's available because they have a lot of repeat clients. So if you look at Swiss hotels and it looks like it's booked, don't despair. You should contact a travel specialist or contact the hotel directly and see what really is available. That's
okay. Good tip. So Jonathan Epstein from Celebrated Experiences, our UK and Ireland specialist on the WOW list. So the UK and Ireland have dropped all COVID requirements. Does it feel like pre-pandemic times?
Well, I think Ireland it's so special. I mean, the fact that Ireland was the strictest in Europe, it was so hard to get in, and then they followed their rules. It was all about, we're going to vaccinate and we're going to get the numbers up really, really fast. And they did. Between March and July, August, pretty much everyone was vaccinated. The numbers were one of the highest in the world. And it just led to a very good fall. And then when Omicron hit, it was never about the total number. It became about hospitalizations and ICU. And those numbers barely moved while the other numbers were going up. So it's the UK and Ireland have kind of taken that approach where if you're vaccinated and boosted, you pretty much are maybe going to get sick a little bit if you have it. But so it's been a pretty much open society now for a few months.
And so tell us about what you can do. I mean, it sounds like there is a lot of holiday availability in the UK, in England and Scotland and Ireland. Like what are you seeing?
So what happens basically is we have availability up until about September And then the people who, so those are people who've been craving going to the UK and Ireland when it's cozy, open fires, just really comfortable and warm. And they love the Christmas lights, the cities. But then you have the people who we start getting phone calls around September 23rd. And those are the people who couldn't find any space in the Caribbean and the other islands in the Atlantic. They go to the UK and Ireland. The weather is not quite the same, but there are hotels with space, and they go and have a great time. I mean, I went hiking last December in Ireland in Killarney National Park, and it was fantastic. It's it was 40s, 50s, and I think that's what you get in that time of the year. The weather is, yeah, it'll be cold, but it's not colder than so much of the United States, and I think that's the other thing. You can. If you live in Michigan, you're going to go to Ireland, the UK to warm up that time of year. So another big draw that time of year that we've seen is football. We booked more, soccer. We booked more football tickets last fall during a pandemic than we did in 2019. For another day, why it's so popular. But that is a huge trend. And we get so many families, oh, we want to go see football when we're there in June. And I'm like, it's a little bit like asking to go to an NFL game in May. It's just, it's not there. So, but fall is the best time. And in winter is the best time for football matches. I think about those epic hotels, the castles, the manors, they're dressed up best that time of year when it's all festive and warm and they're so well lit. It's just really that time of year that I think it's my favorite time of year in the destinations is November, December. And I think the biggest lesson, I think everyone on this screen would agree right now, is those who were fortunate enough to travel during COVID. The biggest takeaway was the authenticity of travel when it's being enjoyed by the people who live there, not being surrounded by other tourists. And as much as I love being in the destinations in summer, they're just more magical when they're more authentic and real, and there's a warmth to it. And that's the irony. Like, there's a warmth to these destinations when they're actually at their coldest. And so we're looking forward to a really robust year. I mean, you had some great Wendy Perrin readers and travelers with us this past winter. We even had families traveling in January and February, and the takeaways from that, because we've never really had that before. And people are really discovering that you don't have to go to places just when it's summertime. And it's really exciting for us.
Right. Yeah, it does feel more authentic when it's like, who you're meeting and who you're seeing and passing by on the street is all the locals as opposed to all the tourists. Yeah.
100%.
Great. Jonathan, thank you.
Of course.
So now let's move along to Philip Haslet of Unique Provence. And Philip, you are in Corsica right now.
That's right.
It's past midnight your time, so we really appreciate your staying up late. Thank you.
Well, no, it's great. It's great to be able to tell you all about it. And about, well, at the moment, as I say, I'm in Corsica. I'm on a research. This is a destination that people don't know or know very little. It's breathtaking. It really is breathtaking. Right now in France, as you know, and it's the same right now, May, June this year, it's chock-a-block. There is nothing. But for the winter, we're starting to get some good, more and more requests. So it's something that I would say you wouldn't need to hesitate on too much. You've got to, you would have to start moving, seeing the trend that we've had in these last few months, just generally for what's coming up. Go ahead.
Well, Philip, I really wanted you to be a part of this conversation because last winter we got several awesome reviews from travelers about these incredible experiences of France that they had in the wintertime. Provence in December, Christmas in the Alps. I mean, it's like you can do so much, I think, in France in the wintertime that people have no idea. They just don't even think about it. Can you tell us a little bit about what you can do, like the sorts of trips you could take around early December or Christmas, New Year's?
Okay, so basically, Provence has got the great advantages. Jonathan was saying, it's if people go to warm up maybe in England and Ireland, and of course in Provence, well, you can definitely warm up because it's even warmer. and there is availability. Some places are closed, but well, as you've seen and as you just said, we've had plenty of travelers last year that we probably wouldn't have had normally, because outside of the whole COVID situation, people tended not to. And we've always tried to push it. We've always tried to push it for lots of reasons. And one of the reasons is the fact that there's no one around, the fact that in December, the south of France, the weather is nearly always breathtaking. It is perfect. The light is clear, the colors are beautiful. Yes, there are less hotels open. That is a fact. It is a fact, although I actually think that that's probably going to change because of the trends that we've seen. So Provence is definitely a big destination. Paris is obviously a big destination all year round, but in the wintertime, it's fantastic. And then you have the east of France. So around Christmas, so a couple of weeks before December and up to Christmas, you have Colmar, Strasbourg, Montbéliard, which are the east, and they're famous for their, so on the east side, and they're famous for their Christmas markets, which are a real destination. And we've never sold as much as in the last year because people wanted to come during the winter. And then, of course, from then on, we have the Alps. And the Alps, you have everything. You have real towns and villages like Chamonix or Megève. You have serious ski resorts, and you're going to find those in Switzerland. You're going to find those elsewhere as well. And what we try to do is offer something beyond just skiing. It's a little bit of, a bit of fun. We took a family last winter. It was her birthday, so we had some huskies waiting in front of her hotel to take her to the restaurant with a little note saying, you have to drive this to the restaurant, otherwise you don't eat. And so she learned how to husky dog. Well, she didn't actually. The guy took her there anyway. But the fact is, there is an awful lot. But all of France, I would say the south of France, Paris, east of France, are perfect. There is availability. This year, as I say, it's going to fill faster. We know that. And it's going to be the case for everywhere. But also there is a vibe at the moment, even though it's so busy. And I'm looking at what's happening now. The vibe, there's a sort of an energy, because people have had this sort of pent up not being able to travel, and everyone's so happy to travel. And so that's also something that's happening, and then I'm totally expecting to happen this winter.
Yep, absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you. We're seeing the energy too. So thank you, Philip. And now let's move along to Virginia Erorita of Made for Spain and Portugal. Virginia, you are in Cadiz in southern Spain right now, yes?
Yes, I am. Very happily south here. And, it was lovely listening to everybody, because really it is the same Europe travelers used to come, but it's a totally different place in winter because we don't have travelers. So, maybe this year at the end of fall, we have fall availability, we have winter availability, but it's a great time to do an insider's version of Portugal and Spain, maybe suggesting the south of Spain and Portugal being a very great time. We can, visit castles with owners, we can have aperitivo outdoors, and maybe it gets a little colder at night, 50 degrees, but it's warm during the day.
Well, I think what you said about outdoors is key, because I've been to Spain. I've been there in December. I've been to Spain in December. I've been there in February. I've taken the family on winter vacations to Spain. It's always been very sunny. Yes, it rains occasionally, but then it stops raining, and it's always nicer than it is back home. Let's put it that way. But you can do a lot outdoors. And I think that, during the pandemic, Spain, there's a lot more terraces where you dine outdoors now. There's dining earlier, isn't there? I feel like restaurants are serving earlier at night, and there's just a lot of outdoor dining.
Yeah, totally. Also during the day, maybe it's colder at night, but during the day it can get 60, 70 degrees. So, it really changes. So it's very, very nice to be outdoors midday and for, early dinners, because we began getting used to this new version of of ourselves having tapas or having dinner at an earlier time. So, many you are going to find if you travel now to Spain, Portugal, that the restaurants are open longer hours because they are opening earlier. But there's a lot to be done outside on top of the cycling, the hiking. But this is the time, as we were hearing, to taste the new wines, the new olive oil, visit local producers, a lot, really very open. And the same with the south of Portugal is very, very nice. But even in places like the Douro Valley that are, more, whether it's a little rainy or maybe chilly, it's not cold. It's not cold. It's not freezing cold. It's not, the Northern Europe or France, it's Southern Europe. So it's very, very, very easy. And even when the weather is a little rainy or chilly, it's a great time, to be outdoors last night that gets warmer, but then, get a red wine, have a massage, do yoga, visit local wineries, cooking classes, because even winter, even cold, it's not cold. It's Southern Europe. It's very, very easy and very nice.
Exactly.
And also a great time to visit Madrid. It's booming this year.
Well, also there are all those new hotels in Madrid. So, I mean, you're lucky about that because then you've just got all those extra hotel rooms that we all, you desperately need nowadays.
Yes, and also, they are happily given nice rates for the end of the year. So maybe it's the right time to come over.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you, Virginia. And now let's move a little bit closer to the United States. I mean, it's great that I'm just so glad that in Europe, there's a lot of holiday availability and a lot of great ideas for what you can do that's festive over Thanksgiving and Christmas. But there are a lot of people who just want to go to a sunny beach. They want to stay close to the United States. They want to, they're looking for tropical islands, that sort of thing. And so I wanted to talk to Eric Sheets of Latin Excursions. Hi, Eric. Can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the options closer to the, there's a lot in Panama, Colombia, Central America, what are some of the options for like people who want a tropical beach experience? Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all. And it sure is nice to be here discussing the potential planning of trips over just dreaming about them. And Wendy and everybody, we are finding some holiday availability, especially towards festive in Colombia, particularly Cartagena, which is a Caribbean gem. There's a new addition by the Sofitel on the Baru beach, and it's a game changer because now you can think of Cartagena not only as a place to visit as a colonial gem, but also as a beach destination. So we do have still some availability at that new hotel. And in Galapagos, believe it or not, there's still some cabins available on the top of venture vessel, as well as even private boats that are available for families or friends. In Panama, surprisingly, there's very little availability in the traditional beach areas, but you can maybe consider, if you use Copa Airlines, to stop over Panama and visit the Pearl Islands during the whale season. And you could do day trips from staying in the colonial part of town. Another thing, Wendy and everyone, I wanted to share are some unusual opportunities that have emerged in my locations recently, or as a result as a pandemic. I'm seeing that airport transfers aren't what they used to be. Cartagena or Havana, convertible classic car airport transfers and vintage car transfers are now in demand. In Costa Rica, you can hire an open air ATV for a transfer. And another thing I'm seeing is that many more villas are now offering al fresco dining, so outdoor dining. Another trend I've been seeing is that restaurants now are becoming storytellers behind the ingredients they're using, full stories behind these ingredients and where they come from. So that's an interesting result of the pandemic, I think, in the countries I work with.
And so of course, there's a lot you can do that's open air. In those locales.
Definitely.
What about if somebody wants sort of like an remote island getaway? Is there such a thing you can recommend?
I would say one of the interesting new additions in Ecuador actually is along the coastline, not in the Galapagos, but the continental shelf. There's a new vessel called Contiki, and they're doing island visits, and lots of the most people don't know that the Galapagos animals are actually present on these small islands that are dot the Ecuadorian coastline. So that's something that is a new addition. And in going back to Cartagena, the Baru Island has a long white sand beach, and which was never unheard of. And it's about an hour from Cartagena by car, or about 45 minutes by boat.
Right, great, yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of US travelers, they might not realize that these countries are closer than you might think. I mean, they're within, you know, a 4 or 5 hour flight. So
Definitely.
great, thank you, Eric.
Nice seeing you all.
Let's move a little farther south to Maita Baranechea of My10. You are with us in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Can you unmute yourself, Maita?
Sorry, I was. Thank you, Wendy. Hello, everyone. Yes, I am in Buenos Aires.
And so tell us about, I mean, you're one of the WOW list specialists for Argentina, Chile, Patagonia. Everyone always wants to go to Patagonia for the holidays. Is it all completely booked up? Like, what would you recommend to people who do want to go down and see Southern South America this winter?
Well, you know, your winter is our summer. The first thing to bear in mind is we have opposite seasons. So our spring, summer, and fall, which goes from November to April, is the best time to visit Patagonia, Argentina in general, and Chile in general. So the peak season happens to be Christmas and New Year. So if that's when you're planning to travel to our part of the world, then there you have to be a little bit more open-minded, because many places get full far in advance. But when I think foreigners think of Patagonia, they're thinking of the glaciers region. But Patagonia is much bigger than that. It goes from a lake district to a South Atlantic coast, to the lakes region, the Andean region, all the way south to Fireland. There are different national parks in both sides, in Chile and in Argentina. So it's not only Torres del Paine and Calafate and the Glaciers National Park. So if you want to visit any of the other, you even have wine regions that are spectacular in Patagonia. You have the wildlife, which is the best time to come and see the whales, the penguins, the sea lions, the elephant seals, the orcas. It's amazing. And that happens, again, November is the perfect time. December, the whales are gone, but all the rest of the animals that I mentioned are still there. But I would say if you want to come in the peak season, then Patagonia can be a little tricky if you want to go to the glaciers region. But remember, Argentina is a land of contrast. Our country is very long. It's as long as if you measured central Canada to the south of Mexico. So we cover all different kinds of geographies, from jungle and waterfalls and deserts in the north to a spectacular wine region by the Andes in the center, a beautiful and very cosmopolitan city as Buenos Aires. And then all the south is what I just mentioned, Patagonia, all the way south to Antarctica. So there are choices. So I would say outside that peak week of Christmas and New Year's, there's room everywhere.
That's great to know. Good. And so let's move along to even further south, Antarctica. Ashton Palmer with Expedition Trips. Ashton, you're in Seattle right now, but you are the Antarctica expert. Tell us what you're seeing in terms of coming winter, the holidays, availability, what's going on with Antarctica cruises.
Thank you, Wendy. Yes, it's a great time to visit Antarctica. As Maita mentioned, we're summer in the Southern Hemisphere. And so the season for Antarctica trips is November through March. I love what is considered early season, which is November. It's very pristine. It's what people think they're going to see in Antarctica, lots of sea ice, and the wildlife is arriving, and it's an exciting time. There's good availability this year, and the reason for that is that the smaller expedition-style cruising industry has really grown over the last few years, and a number of new ships have been added, which has expanded inventory. So even though we did see some trips fill up from people who couldn't travel last year or the year before, with the additional inventory, there are definitely trips available in November, certainly in December, and certainly January and later as well. So I think that it's a great time to go, and there's still good opportunities. And in addition, I would say we're also seeing some very good pricing. I had reached out to some of the different companies before this event, and a number of them had extended some special savings and were willing to offer even more to encourage people to travel. So I think it's a good time to go.
Can you give us a couple of examples of that?
Yes. For example, I was chatting Silver Sea Cruises. They have an air cruise program where you actually fly across the Drake Passage down to Antarctica, and they offered an additional, I think it was an additional $1,500 off per person, which you could put towards your international airfare to get down there. There was a 25%, normally a 20% discount, but they gave us an exclusive WOW listers, an additional 5%, bringing it to 25% off a brand new ship called the Ultramarine in Antarctica, which has helicopters and all the bells and whistles, and that's over Thanksgiving and then an early December trip as well.
Right. Well, it's great to hear about the new ships that make more cruises possible. So thank you so much, Ashton.
Absolutely.
So now let's move along to Stuart Rigg with Southern Crossing. Stuart, you are in Sydney, Australia. Thank you for rising early in the morning to join us.
Oh, it's great to be here, Wendy, and to be chatting to all my colleagues and friends around the world, and of course your travelers. And yeah, it's great to be back open. You know, we had a long, lengthy COVID closure of 2 years, so but we're back open, and demand is actually very strong immediately. I think, you know, the perceived clean, fresh air we have and the wide open spaces is really lending itself to an immediate influx of travelers, which is great.
Yeah, and I think just anything being closed for 2 years, it's like when you can't get there, then suddenly everyone wants it. So
That's right.
I can imagine. So tell us, I mean, looking ahead to, so of course, summer in Australia is our way. So when we get around to winter, that's summer where you are. And what do you see as sort of like the best pockets of availability? Where and when would you recommend? If people want to go to Australia, what do you recommend for this coming November through March?
Yeah, sure. If you're talking about this sort of holiday season, Australia is a continent, so it's a big destination, and we do have very diverse climatic zones. So you could almost draw a line across the center of Australia, and you know the northern parts are a great destination to visit in the sort of May, June, July, August period, whereas our southern states are the places you'd really want to be in sort of November through March, April, so the holiday season. So that's of course the peak season. So the states of Sydney, New South Wales, Victoria, which is home to Melbourne, Tasmania, Southern Australia, the south part of Western Australia, they're all fantastic places to visit in the winter, the Northern Hemisphere winter.
And are there any cool new sort of can't miss experiences in Australia?
Well,
I just
really
can imagine that you all have been innovating during those 2 years, and there's something cool. There always is in Australia.
Yeah, no, look, I think what's interesting is, you know, the worst impacted areas, even during periods when Australians could travel here in Australia, were cities. People were really avoiding cities. Probably the case globally. But certainly here. And yet, amazingly, a lot of the new inventory, attractions, and certainly properties are in our cities. Very exciting times in Sydney in particular, where we've got a beautiful new hotel resort property. That's a first in Australia, a city venue that's actually a resort. That's the Crown development. We've got Capella coming, Kimpton, Ace, lots of development. But even lots of lovely innovations. We've got this beautiful property just open. It's called Lily Pad. It's like a luxury floating villa just off Palm Beach, one room. You know, so we've got the resorts, the hotels, and then beautiful villas that stand alone. I think the other big thing is multi-day hiking, which we've always had here in Australia, particularly in Tasmania. But lots of regions now, we've got these beautiful walks where you can get really into nature, away from anything, wonderful guides, amazing wildlife, and of course, great native Australian foods. And we do wine pretty well as well. So you know, multi-day hiking is really something that's developed.
Great, great. Well, Stuart, thank you for that lovely glimpse of Down Under. And now I'd like to move on to Julian Harrison of Premier Tours, safari specialist on the WOW list. And, you know, Julian, I think that safaris turned out to be a much safer type of travel than a lot of people were predicting at the start of the pandemic. I mean, because you're virtually in the open air the whole time, as you know, accommodations can be open air, the airports were empty for a long time. Tell us a little bit about what is the coming winter safari season. I know that the summer is like very, very, very busy with safaris, and then the holidays are as well. What's available when? What do you recommend?
Well, the winter season that we have down there, as you know, Stuart mentioned, it's summer down there as well. The weather is great from November through March, pretty much. Other than as you said, the Christmas New Year period is busy, but there's a good amount of space available, and it's a time that's known as the green season, and people will flinch when I say because we get some rain at that time of the year. But realistically, the rain that falls in somewhere like Botswana, for example, you're talking about 2 to 4 inches per month, not per day or per week, but per month. So very little rain. But that little bit of rain that they do get makes everything lush and green. And so if you look at any websites on Botswana, you'll see that virtually all of the pictures are taken during that green season because it's just a fantastic photographic time of the year. It's also a time because there's a lot of lush green grass around. A lot of your grazing species like the wildebeest, zebra, antelope, not giraffe, but white rhino, things like that. They're all having their offspring at that time of the year. And then given the the profusion of young ones running around, your predators tend to be more prolific as well because it's easier pickings for them at that time of the year. Up in East Africa, it's even less rain. In Kenya and Tanzania, you only get rains in November and December, but again, very little. It's more in the form of an afternoon or early evening thunderstorm. So weather-wise, it's fantastic. Game viewing it's fantastic. Most people want to go and see the migration, during June through October, but during the winter season, you can go down to the southern section of the Serengeti, an area known as Ndutu. And that's where the large migration herds are actually stationary at that time. That's where they're also having their offspring. So you're seeing huge herds of wildebeest and zebra, and again, along with the predators. At a time when it's way less crowded, way less expensive. There's also a lot of the migratory birds that come down from Europe are all in the area during that time. So it's a huge profusion of birds, lots of colorful birds and different species. And it's a time when you can get some really good deals. There's, often lodges are offering, buy 6 nights and get a 7th or an 8th night free. Some lodges and camps are offering scenic helicopter flights for those that are a little more adventurous. They'll take the doors off and fly over the Okavango Delta. I think, Brooke, you might have done that actually. And it's just a time that's really, I like to call it a time of quality, not necessarily quantity. Your peak season, in the dry season is when you're going to see huge numbers of elephants in northern Botswana, for example. But in the winter season, you're certainly still going to see plenty of elephants. And I always tell people, you don't need to see especially if it's your first safari, you don't need to see 200 elephants in a day. 20 are incredibly impressive as well. So it's a time that I do encourage people to go. It's good value for money, and it's good game viewing at that time as well.
Great, good to know. Thank you so much, Julian. And now, last but not least, I want to turn to Mark Talio of Entree Destinations. Mark is in Vancouver. He is Canada expert extraordinaire. And I wanted to come back to our own backyard, Canada, because I think a lot of people, they only think about, I'm going to go to Canada in the summertime. There is so much to do in the wintertime right next door. Everything from the Northern Lights to, Mark, you tell us what can be done in the wintertime in Canada.
Oh, well, yeah, we have, like you said, Canada's an enormous place. And, I think that there's a lot of different ways to do the winter in Canada. And, the way that I see it, you can sort of split up the north or the northern territories and provinces versus the south. And, the south you can visit in December, January, February, March, and April. And in the north, the conditions are much more harsh. So the north opens up a little bit better in, let's say, toward mid-February and toward the end of April. And that's because before that, it gets to be like minus 50, minus 60 degrees. So, lots to do. I've spent a lot of the winter actually developing new products and experiences. So, I'll give you just sort of the last 5 in a nutshell that I developed. I'll start in British Columbia. So off the coast of BC is a place called Haida Gwaii, which used to be called the Queen Charlotte Islands. And it's primarily an indigenous populated area. Magical, mystical. The climate is actually quite nice because it's on the coast. And there you can have a really meaningful and fulfilling experience connecting with indigenous people from the Haida culture, actually. I'm going to go west to east. I did some work in Alberta this year. And again, Alberta, you can pretty much visit any month of the year. But Banff, Jasper, Lake Louise, Alberta in general is that winter wonderland where you can get the cabin, you can do snowshoeing, you can do cross-country skiing, you can take helicopter flights over the mountains, snowmobiling. And again, of course it's going to be cold. It's a question of how cold. And at Alberta, again, you can pretty much go any time of the winter and have a beautiful, winter wonderland kind of trip. Quebec, recently we've developed new experiences which have you going into sort of, outside of Montreal and Quebec, beautiful areas where there's outfitters that allow you to snowmobile, look for wildlife, ice fish, snowshoeing, even flying around in helicopters and sort of landing on remote places. So Quebec, is full of culture. It's definitely alive. Just outside of Quebec City is the Ice Hotel, which I also visited for my second time. Unique thing to do, to come up and stay in Quebec City for even a romantic getaway or, getaway with the children, and then spend a night in a hotel literally made of snow and ice. And, I think the most unique and interesting things that we've been doing are also in Northern Canada. So the north of Canada is, probably the size of Europe. It's pretty enormous if you really look at the landmass, and only a couple of 100,000 people live there. And that's what makes one of the things that makes it unique. The north of Canada has the Northwest Territories, the Yukon Territory, and a place called Nunavut. And there, again, the indigenous people are the majority of the people that live there. So we've created cultural experiences. But Northern Lights is a big selling item. I'd say that since the pandemic came, it's really trending up. There's still definitely availability. But, the Northwest Territories gets 200 nights a year of Northern Lights. And physically, it sits directly under the auroral oval. So technically, it's the best place on Earth to go and see the Northern Lights. And again, just, I think probably the coolest thing I've ever done in the winter, I did about a month ago, which was to go up to a place called Tuktoyaktuk. And that is on the north coast of the Arctic Ocean. It is, if I'm not mistaken, the most northern highway on Earth that leads to the Arctic Ocean. It's an interesting village. We landed a helicopter on the frozen ocean about 20 kilometers offshore. We were fed whale, or what they call muktuk, venison loin, and moose chili. And so, there you meet artists. You drive on an ice highway. And like I said, you can explore the frozen Arctic Ocean. It's pretty wild. And while looking at the Northern Lights at night. So, yeah.
Very cool. I too have been on that frozen Arctic Ocean. And in fact, an Eskimo up there once told me there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. That's
That's
what I
right.
learned. If you're dressed, if you're not cold if you're dressed right.
That's right. Yeah, we were in -40 when we were there.
Yeah. Yeah. So for the Northern Lights, just so that everybody knows, what is the time, what months of the year, from when to when can you actually see the Northern Lights?
Well, I mean, technically, from August until May. Although there's peak times, and if you go in August, September, that has bearing on what activities you do during the day, because that's still considered summer fall. But in the north, come November, it gets wintry, it gets dark. So in the winter time, the best time is roughly from the 3rd or 4th week of January until the end of April. That's really prime time.
Okay, that's great to know. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Well, now I think we should get to some of the questions that have been asked in our Q&A box here. Brooke, would you like to take over?
Sure. Well, and Wendy, maybe you can at least start to answer this first one. One viewer wants to hear, are you still recommending single country trips? Is it easier now to travel between the UK and the EU, for example?
So I think it is easier to combine countries now than it was before, because so many countries have dropped their entry requirements. But I always worry, what if there's another subvariant, another wave that comes along, and suddenly European countries are changing their entry requirements again, and suddenly you do need to get a test or have other, you do need certain paperwork to get in. I would love to ask Jonathan Epstein. Jonathan, if you have one more moment, if you would like to comment on that, if you have advice as to combining countries or sticking with a single country.
As someone who gets their destinations combined way too much with like a Scotland, Ireland trip or London, Paris, I hope that there are lessons that travelers take away from the pandemic. It's more memory making, less logistics and time at airports and train stations. I just don't understand. I get it if these are countries where there's not much to do, and I'll look around this screen and everyone here is in places that you could spend 90 days in, and you want to be able to get to do nearly everything. And I think about our destinations, and that's the trend to me. The ultimate trend that came out of COVID is these gorgeous length of stays we're getting on trips now, where people aren't racing to see the Cliffs of Moher and then go to this spot in the Burren and then get to Galway, or a trip in the Scottish Highlands actually spends time in maybe 6 of the regions of the Scottish Highlands, doesn't just touch part of it for 2 nights. And that's the game here. The more you spend time in a place, you don't have to keep a tight schedule, and you let whimsy get in the way. And the best example is what we saw last Thanksgiving, where you had Americans coming over to Ireland and the UK and taking over cottages, manors, castles, and having these epic Thanksgivings during that time of year that mostly Americans had never come over before in mass. And so that's my biggest hope, coming out of COVID is less time in airports, especially when the airlines, come on, they're canceling things all the time. You're like asking for pain when you could just be sitting somewhere enjoying your time in a great destination, or in my case, in a great pub, right? Or in a distillery. No, you could be in an airport instead. I just never understand it. Go somewhere and dive in.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why people want to spend so much time with logistics and in airports getting between places when they could just actually enjoy the places they're in. But I'd love to get another perspective on that, Maria and Brian, because I'm sure you've got a lot of people going between Italy and Switzerland. How do you feel about combining countries?
Well, in terms of visiting Italy and Switzerland together, the trains are super easy. And so that is a little, I understand Jonathan's point about the airports, but you can do it by train, high-speed trains, which are comfortable and fun and scenic. And the other thing is, though, you have to really think about people's practicalities. You know, people can't always be jetting off to see places. So if they have this 2-week period and they want to go to 2 destinations, you know, and they may not be able to do it again before all the kids are off in jobs or whatever, then that's what they want to do. So, you know, we want to help them make that happen. And we have had a number, you know, even to visit Sicily, for example, you have to change planes. So, you know, coming from the States or from North America. So I think it's doable if people want to do it. And, you know, you have to kind of go with what, you know, meet them where they are. Like, what do people want to do and what can they do? Because not everybody has endless days for travel or the family together, et cetera. So they want to make the most of the time. And if that to them means going to 2 different countries, you know,
Right.
because that's what the bucket lists are for the kids or the parents or whatever, then that's what we try to make happen.
We're also seeing a lot of like the study abroad programs have all picked up again, right? This past fall and spring and everything. And so we're seeing a lot of people who maybe have a child in another country in Europe and the child doesn't want to stay where they are. They want to go on vacation for the holidays. And so the child will be in Europe and they'll say, oh, we'll go to Italy for a vacation with them. We have also seen that people are going to be, we have one client who just recently called, his kid is staying in Milan. The last thing he wants to do is hang out with his parents in Milan where he's studying. He wants to go somewhere. And so we're going to have him go to Sicily, you know, for a little while. So that's the kind of, you know, little trend we're seeing just with people visiting their kids who are studying abroad because, you know, study abroad closed for a year. And now it's open again. And there are a lot more people interested in it. A lot more students are catching up by studying abroad.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's great to see. Virginia, I'm wondering, what about the ease of combining Spain and Portugal? Like, would you say that that's easy, or is that something that makes you nervous?
It's very, very easy. Actually, you know, we have many clients like arriving in Barcelona, Madrid, departing from Lisbon, from Porto. You know, once you land, it's like an island, it's a peninsula with the 2 countries. So, you know, we drive travelers around from one country to the other. You just don't realize if you have the radio on, you realize because all of a sudden the language is different in the radio. But other than that, it feels very easy to move around. There's just no difference. So it's very, very doable.
And Maita, what about combining like Argentina, Chile, Uruguay? How easy or convenient is that, you know, now in the pandemic?
Well, now it's good because the borders are open. So remember that Argentina and Chile are separated by the Andes Mountains, and they're spectacular. So they're wonderful to be crossed either by land, by air, or by water. And at any latitude, you know, in the deserts, in the wine regions, in the lake regions, in the glaciers, it's always spectacular. So you can always cross them one way and another, and you could cross them one time over the air and see the range from above, which is amazing. And then do it by land. So you have a more close-up view, and also doing the fjords or the lakes. There was one crossing by water by lakes, which is 1 day or 2 days in the lake region. That is amazing. Another one that is crossing through the fjords from Punta Arenas to Ushuaia in the south of Argentina. And then to Uruguay, it's a piece of cake. It's so easy. You cross 1 hour and it's across from Buenos Aires to Colonia, a UNESCO heritage site, which is beautiful, or a 3-hour ferry from Buenos Aires to Montevideo, or a puddle jumper by plane, or again, by car, you can cross over the bridges. So it's very, very easy.
Great. And well, there's another question here about combining Australia and New Zealand. You know, would you combine Australia and New Zealand together, or just do one country at a time? Stuart, would you like to speak to the feasibility? I mean, how much time does it take to combine Australia and New Zealand? What's the minimum you need?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is probably the most commonly asked questions of myself and Sarah, my fellow WowList colleague over at the Tasman in Auckland. And it's, look, it is a good question. In terms of a minimum time, I would say 3 weeks. But that is minimum. I mean, Australia is a continent, and, you know, New Zealand is a very, very diverse country. So what we hate to do is not to do justice to either. And although the flying time between the two it's only 2.5 or 3 hours, depending on the gateway, it's essentially a day of travel. You know, it's an international journey. So with the check-in times, the transfers at either end, if you're on a 10-day, visit, which often from North America, that's the case, and one day of it is just traveling between the two, it's a sizable chunk. So the short answer is I'd say 3-week minimum to combine the two, but you could easily spend 3 weeks in Australia or New Zealand. So come back and do both.
You could definitely easily. I'm taking my family to New Zealand over the Christmas, New Year's holiday, and I bought tickets on the new nonstop from JFK to Auckland, and there's not nearly enough time. I mean, this is the best chunk of time my family can possibly carve out, and it's still not nearly enough. It's only half the amount of time we need for New Zealand. Yeah. So in any case, we
also have Project Sunrise, it's called, with Qantas pioneering the direct New York to Sydney flight, which is going to start in 2025. So that's a very exciting aviation development.
Oh, good. Yes. Brooke, I'll let you take over again.
Sure. Well, Ashton, we have a listener who wants to hear from you. What are the trade-offs on the air cruise approach besides less time? Are you missing wildlife? Can you talk about that versus doing the Drake Passage on a ship?
Yeah. I think the main reason that people choose to do an air cruise is because they want to avoid crossing the Drake Passage, or they're short on time. They want to do a shorter trip. Once you're in Antarctica, you're seeing the same things and you're doing the same activities. So you're not necessarily missing out there. The thing that I would say is to always look at the number of days you actually have in the destination, whether you do an air cruise or a traditional expedition cruise. Focus on the number of days you actually get in Antarctica, because that's what will translate to the experience that you have. And then I always do tell people that with the air cruises, they are dependent on weather. And so there's a slight risk that you might get delayed. It happens every year, once in a while. And, so just understand what the risks are. But in general, I would say that, Antarctica delivers and is an amazing place. So it's a good way to go.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Mark, question for you. Are there nice hotels in the Northern Territories of Canada to stay to see the Northern Lights?
There's no luxury brand hotels up in the north. There are reasonably, comfortable hotels in Whitehorse and in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and in Dawson City, Yukon. But I think the best way to see the Northern Lights are really primarily from lodges. And so the question is, or maybe the answer is, there are comfortable lodges. Again, there's no particular luxury resort that jumps off the map as the obvious answer. Consider it authentic, consider it somewhat rustic, again, northern, but wonderful hospitality culture, wonderful service. Food, considering how north you can get, is pretty spectacular. And yeah, so I would say that, let's say in the 4-star lodge category, we've got a small collection, but certainly appropriate and with definitely a sense of place in the north to see the Northern Lights. And yeah.
Great. And another question, keeping in Canada, another viewer wants to know what you would recommend in Canada over US Thanksgiving holiday week.
Well, that is in November, toward the end of November. So, the ski hills are beginning to open then. Generally November, I want to say, is my least favorite month to travel to Canada. And primarily it's because it's kind of in between seasons. September, October, at least you've got fall colors. But November is that in between time of year where winter activities are very much weather dependent, because it's still early for actual winter activities, and summer activities are finished by November. So, I'd say that visiting some of the cities like Vancouver is beautiful every day of the year. I think Montreal can be great in November. But in general, if you want to be in the wilderness or if you want to be, on an activity-driven holiday, again, with the exception of really early skiing, it's kind of in between, our fall and our winter. So I'd say that you can reach out to me through Wendy's website and through our profile page, and we can sort of look at what you're interested in and what you're after, and I'll give you a straight, honest opinion on if I think it's a good choice or not.
Great, thank you. And maybe one last question we have time for Philip. Do you book apartments and villas in France?
Yeah, we do. Apartments mostly Paris, although we do have some. In fact, you can look at some of the reviews of our apartment skills in obscure regions of France. We do have some great apartments in some very obscure places, and villas we have across the country, and then chalets in the Alps, of course. So yes, we have a very, very good collection, some excellent partners on that front.
Great. Well, I think
Great.
that's our hour.
Yeah, I guess we're through with our hour, and I know that Mark needs to get to a Cinco de Mayo office party, and I'm sure we could all use a margarita at this point. So I just want to thank our panel from around the globe for joining us, especially those of you who stayed up very late at night to join us. Philip and Virginia, thank you so much. And Stuart, thank you for getting up so early in Australia. I hope the audience has gained a lot of great ideas for what they can do this coming winter, including over the holidays. Remember that we've got our final Zoom of WOW Week tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern on how to get the best airline flights and seats and fares in 2022 and 2023. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Take good care.
Thank you. See you guys.
Happy travels. Thank you.
Bye.